Tonight and next week are interesting chapters because chapter 17 and 18 deal with the fall of Babylon. So we saw their rise to power slowly in the first 3.5 years, the beast system, I should say. The second half of from the middle point out, it deals with the judgments that we saw, the bowls, the trumpets, and the sealed judgments, ending with the bowl judgments. And so now we're seeing that the beast system is falling apart. And tonight we're going to read about the religious half, so the false prophet and the religious system, and how this is going to play out as far as taking its downfall. So the last 3.5 years are the turning point where the beast system collapses, and then ultimately where Jesus Christ comes and wars with the false prophet and the beast, throws them into the lake of fire, and Satan will be bound for 1,000 years. So the concept of Babylon, so this will be our introduction. So we saw in Revelation 16 and in 14 that Babylon is already declared that Babylon was going to fall. And so here in Revelation 17 and 18, the fall of Babylon is carefully detailed. Babylon is mentioned 287 times in the scriptures, and that's more than any other city except for Jerusalem. So that's kind of interesting. Babylon is or was a literal city on the Euphrates, and you can read about that in Genesis 11. And that shows that right after the flood, that Babylon was the seed of civilization that expressed organized hostility to God. So remember the Tower of Babel. And so this is where, after the flood, as the world repopulated again. Hey, John, welcome. As the world repopulated, Babylon became, or Babel at that point, became the area where civilization grew. And so they expressed their organized hostility to God, at the Tower of Babel. So Babylon was later the capital of the empire that cruelly conquered Judah. God used them. You can read about in Jeremiah, Daniel, so how God used Babylon and Nebuchadnezzar, King Nebuchadnezzar, to pronounce his judgment on Israel when they rebelled and were in a backslidden state. So Babylon, to them, the Jews, was the essence of all evil. It was the embodiment of cruelty, the foe of God's people, and the lasting type of sin, the carnality, lust, and greed. To those familiar with the Old Testament, the name Babylon is associated with organized idolatry, blasphemy, and the persecution of God's people. So you remember that there was a statue erected to King Nebuchadnezzar, and if they didn't bow down and worship, that they were to be killed. And so we saw that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were thrown into the fire because they refused to bow. And God miraculously saved them out of the fire. So in John's day, Rome epitomized all the antagonism and the opposition to the Christian faith. And in some ways, the city of Rome was the clearest fulfillment of the Babylon attitude. And if we had to pick one city today that exemplifies the world system or the Babylonian system, perhaps we could say is Los Angeles, or maybe New York City. But Los Angeles is the great exporter of everything, filth, porn industry, the entertainment industry. It promotes the doctrine of demons. And then we have, on the East Coast, we have New York City and the trade and world trade. And that will play a big role in the last days. And then also we have the United Nations in New York. So the concept of Babylon is greater than Revelation 17 and 18 and the Antichrist reign. Babylon was present in John's day, and is typified by Rome in our day, and throughout history as the world system. But under the Antichrist, Babylon in both its religious and commercial aspects will have influence over the whole earth as never seen before. So that kind of gives us an introduction to Babylon and the Babylonian system, the beast system. So here we're going to talk about the religious portion and its downfall here, which is the great harlot, the religious Babylon. And so in verse 1 of chapter 17, it's going to be described by an angel, or by the angel. Verse 1 says, "Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked to me," it was John, saying to me, "Come, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication." My paper clip here. So here he says, "I'll show you the judgment of the great harlot," and her judgment is assured at the outset. There is never any doubt regarding the fate and the ultimate failure of Babylon. And as a religious system, Babylon came into being long before Christianity, but in satanic imitation, it anticipated the coming true Messiah. According to religious history and legend, Babylonian religion was founded by the wife of Nimrod, the great son of Noah, or the great grandson of Noah. And his wife, Nimrod's wife's name is Semiramis, and she is or was the high priestess of idol worship. And she gave birth to a son who she claimed was conceived miraculously. And the name of her son was Tammuz, and he was considered a savior. And many ancient artifacts remain with the familiar motif of the mother Semiramis holding this savior infant Tammuz, which predates Christianity, of course. And it was also said that Tammuz was killed by a wild beast and miraculously was brought back to life. And then the Canaanites, Baal worship was the name for the Babylonian Tammuz. So the Canaanites called him Baal. And so we saw that Baal worship was one of the downfalls of Israel. God told the Israelites to wipe out the surrounding nations, and some of them that they did not ended up leading Israel astray by Israel following their false gods. Ezekiel protests against the ceremony of weeping for Tammuz. And that's found in Ezekiel 8:14. And then Jeremiah mentions the heathen practice of making cakes to the Queen of Heaven, or for the Queen of Heaven, in Jeremiah 7:18, and offering incense to the Queen of Heaven is found in Jeremiah 44. And so it's interesting if you know about anything to do with the Catholic religion, how they also have a Queen of Heaven. They have Mary worship, and so they consider Mary, the mother of Jesus, the Queen of Heaven. And so we see a correlation between the ancient Babylonian with the Semiramis and her son Tammuz. She's being the Queen of Heaven, and he kind of imitates in a way a risen Savior. So there's a lot of correlations where Satan has gotten in and has tried to imitate because he knew God's plan. So So there's imitators, and this is where we see now this new false Babylonian or uh, the beast system of the false religion. So moving on, it says, "Who sits on many waters?" So here Babylon sits on many waters, and that is that she presides over many nations. So remember that the waters usually represents or sea usually represents the people or the nations. And she has a universal international character. And this is a unification of all false idolatrous religion with representatives from apostate Catholicism, Protestantism, as well as a smorgasbord of other religions. So we talked about a few weeks ago how the Pope is trying to morph all these Abrahamic religions into like a one world religion. And so they've also created a worship center in Abu Dhabi where you have Christian faith or Catholicism, Islam, and Judaism is all going to be practiced in this one place. So the woman pictures false religion that will dominate the world in the tribulation period. And many people like to identify this great harlot with the Roman Catholic Church. But this will be something that takes place after the rapture of the church, of the true church. So whatever's left over, the remnant of people that are left over after the rapture will form this, whether it's Catholicism or whatever they end up calling it. I believe it'll be coming out of or led by the Catholic Church out of Rome. False religion isn't limited to any one church. So Roman Catholicism will be the dominant player in religion after the rapture. So the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk. So here we have the religious Babylon intoxicates kings and peoples. Karl Marx was partly right when he said that religion is the opiate of the masses. He was partly right because empty religion is opium of the masses. Makes people do things. So here she's made drunk with the wine of her fornication, and the idea of fornication often has strong associations throughout the Bible with idolatry. And since this is a well-accepted religious system, it is likely to appear as attractive and spiritual, though not necessarily moral. So moving on to verse 3. And so what did John see? So he was carried away, or he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of the abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead a name was written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I marveled with great amazement. So let's tear this apart here. So he says, he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness. So John is carried away into the wilderness. And the desolate nature of the wilderness is an appropriate setting for a vision of judgment. Sitting on a scarlet beast. So the harlot rides the same beast, the 7 heads and 10 horns that was previously seen in Revelation 13, which is the Antichrist and his dictatorship. And so her position, that of riding the beast, indicates on the one hand that she is supported by the political power of the beast, and on the other that she is a dominant role and at least outwardly controls and directs the beast. So this is interesting that the religious system, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Catholic history of the Catholic Church dating back centuries, where they were in control of kings. I mean, they actually controlled what the kings in the countries would do. So here we kind of see the same thing. She's in control, or it appears that she's in control. This religious system is in control of what the beast is doing. So we have this Antichrist who looks on the outside that he is being controlled by this false religion, when in fact it's he that calls the shots, or actually Satan is the one calling the shots. So here we see her association with blasphemy and the dragon's beast are clearly seen from God's perspective. But to the people of the earth, she will look quite religious and have the faith that everybody wants. The woman was arrayed, so she's clothed with emblems of luxury, which is purple and gold and precious stones, and government, scarlet. So we have a red color, purple, gold, red. Yet she offers idolatry, abominations, and impurity, the filthiness of her fornication in this sumptuous setting. So purple and scarlet were colors of splendor and magnificence. The dyes to make the fabric of these colors were rare and costly. And we find in the course of church history that one of the deadliest marks of ecclesiastical corruption is the lust for temporal power. So purple and scarlet were colors of rulers, and including the Pope. I mean, if we look at the Catholic Church, that's one of their colors is purple. So on her forehead, a name was written. And so the name on her forehead identifies her in more ways than one. Roman prostitutes frequently wore a headband with their name engraved on it. And in spite of all her glamour, she is nothing but a prostitute. There is a stark contrast between the woman of Revelation 12, which represented Israel, if you remember, or God's people. So there's a stark contrast between Israel and this woman who represents an idolatrous religion. And these two women, thus related and set over one against the other as opposites and rivals, must necessarily be interpreted in the same way. As the Antichrist corresponds to Christ as a rival and an antagonist of Christ, so the great Babylon corresponds to the woman that bears the man-child as her rival and antagonist. So here we have mystery, Babylon the Great, and this title is not for literal Babylon, but it's a spiritual mystery representation, which is the source, the mother source of all idolatry, which are abominations, and spiritual adultery, the harlots. So this harlot must be larger than any one branch of a religious institution. And she is the embodiment of Satan's own ecumenical movement, the world religion, or the religion of the world system. And so our world, strong with philosophy that it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you believe, is prepared for the harlot's seduction, which we will see the casual disregard for the truth crippling the church today. And so, we see that a lot with the church today. So I won't even get into that. Here she's drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So the woman not only persecutes, but she also revels in her persecution of the godly, as a drunk revels or revels in wine. I marveled with great amazement. So John was amazed because this wasn't pagan persecution, such as he knew in his day, but a religious error and persecution. So this is a pseudo church, which is thirsty for the blood of the saints, And false religion is always the worst enemy of true religion. And we should never forget that some of the most vicious persecution conducted against true Christians has been done in the name of the church. Um, so we see that going back in the Roman Catholic era of Queen Mary, who ruled England, and she's known as Bloody Mary. Some 288 Christians were burned at the stake for their stand for Christian truth between 1555 and 1558. Some of those would include people like William Tyndale, who translated the Bible into English from Latin. So he was strangled, and then his body was burned. And then they ended up using 80% of the New Testament in the King James version has been taken from Tyndale. So I mean, go figure. The first of these martyrs was a man named John Rogers, and who, as he stood chained to a stake, the fire rose around him up to his legs and shoulders, and he rubbed his hands in the flames as if washing his hands in cold water. Then he lifted his hands to heaven and held them high until he was completely consumed by fire. And as Rogers went to the stake with such calm and dignity that the French ambassador wrote that he went to his death as if he was walking to his wedding. His courage was so evident that the huge crowd burst into applause when they saw him walking to the stake. So moving on to verse 7, the great harlot is interpreted here. So verse 7 says, the angel tells John that the harlot will be explained to him. And so verse 7, but the angel said to me, why did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So the angel said, I'll tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast. And so the focus of the explanation is on the beast. It appeared that the harlot rode the Antichrist system. But he is the dynamic factor, using her, as tyrants have always used religion, as a mere tool to accomplish their purposes. And so verse 8, the beast carrying the woman is plainly connected with the beast of Revelation 13. And so the beast that you saw, verse 8, the beast that you saw and is not and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. And then verse 9, 7 mountains associated with this beast. So here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. So if we look at verse 9, the 7 heads of the beast are identified as the 7 mountains on which the woman or the harlot sits. And so it's no reasonable doubt can be entertained as to the meaning of these words. The 7 hills of Rome were commonplace with the Latin poets. And this is true, even though Rome is actually built on more than 7 hills. In other words, the center of the harlot church's power will be Rome. So there's no doubt that it will involve the Catholic Church in one form or the other. Did I skip a verse here? Let me see. I did. So verse 10. So here we have 7 kings and kingdoms. And so verse 10, there are also 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time. So we have 5 fallen, and 1 is. This is very confusing, so it's almost like a riddle if you read through this. 5 have fallen, 1 is, and the other has yet to come. And this is one of the more difficult passages of the book of Revelation. And some explain these 7 kings, 5 past, 1 present, and one to come in the succession of the Roman emperors in John's era. But there are many historical difficulties with this approach, and more likely it is a reference to the five have fallen refers to five world empires before John's day, which would have been Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, the Medes or the Medo-Persia, and then Greece. So that happened before Rome took over. And then one refers to the world empire of John's day, which is Rome. And the other has not yet come refers to the one world empire to come, which is the revival of the Roman Empire. And so when he comes, he must continue for a short time. And the seventh will quickly be taken over by an eighth. So the leader is going to be taken over by another, the eighth person, and he will become the state of the Antichrist, or it will become the state of the Antichrist. Moving on, so we have verse 11, the beast, which is the Antichrist, is clearly identified as the eighth king. So here we have in verse 11, the beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and is going to perdition. So is himself also the eighth. He is out of the seven in the sense that he shares characteristics with all the previous world empires, but his fate is clear that perdition means destruction, and the beast will be destroyed. Verses 12 through 15, so we have 10 kings to come and allies of the Antichrist. So verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom as of yet. And but they receive authority for 1 hour as kings with the beast. These are of one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast. These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. And that will be us when we return with the Lord. Then he said to me, the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. So here, let's go back to the 10 kings who have received no kingdom as of yet. And this probably alludes to a 10-nation confederation, as in the toes of Daniel chapter 2, the chapter 2 image where he saw the statue. And so they are 10 kingdoms which shall rise out of the fourth, which is Rome. Rise out of the fourth great kingdom there. So we have 10, possibly 10 European powers. The writers, going back a few years, had a vision of the European Union or Europe being that of the Roman Empire. I kind of sway away from that. I believe that that will be part of it, but I believe that the world will be moved into 10 world regions. So we won't have like the United States as a world ruler anymore. We will have 10 regions or with different leaders. So, but going back to the 10 European powers, which in the last time in concert and with subjugation to the anti-Christian power shall make war against Christ. In the precise number and form here indicated, they have not yet risen. So this is the Roman Empire that's to come. So the revived Roman Empire will probably come out of Europe, but I believe that they're talking about 10 kings. I believe it's going to be 10 regions. And there's maps that I don't have copies right now, but there's a map showing that they've already started moving the different regions around. So there's going to be 10 different regions around the world, and so we'll see these 10 kingdoms or 10 kings or 10 regions. during the tribulation. We may start seeing that before the rapture. It may happen quickly after the rapture. But so moving on, these are of one mind. So these many have seen the European Union as a potential fulfillment of this, perhaps. But now there are more than 10 nations in this revived Roman Empire or European power, and more on the way. So that's why I also believe that there's going to be 10 regions versus these Roman, the European Union. So there's little doubt that the EU claims to be successor of the ancient Roman Empire, which they do. The EEC started in 1957, which is the European Economic Community. And then when so it started in 57 when 6 European nations met to talk about combining their nuclear, coal, and economic resources. And they met together in Rome and signed the Treaty of Rome, the beginnings of the present European Union. In many places in Europe, the EU flag is just as prominent as the national flag. So what changes in Europe, or the world for that matter, may bring them into the required tail and form? It is not for us to know or to say, but it will happen, and this confederation of nations will emerge as an heir to the ancient Roman Empire. So that's coming. That's on the horizon. So moving on, these nations or these kings are one mind, and they will give their power and authority to the beast, to the Antichrist. So whatever their exact identity, or whoever the exact identity is of these kings, their actions are clear, and they will join with the Antichrist in the war against Christ, Jesus Christ, in the battle alluded to in the 6th and 7th bowls, which we read in Revelation 16:12 through 21. The waters which you saw where the harlot sits. So the harlot presides over peoples and over multitudes and nations and tongues. So this tells us that the harlot's influence is worldwide through her connection to the beast. This will be a true one world religion. The interpretation of the harlot focuses on her relation to the beast. I'm thinking of the beach. So her relation to the beast. She is utterly connected to the beast and his government. If this sounds unthinkable, remember that throughout history, religion, or not true Christianity, has often been the willing servant and the supporter of tyrants. Let me grab some water here. So now moving on some more here. The great harlot is judged. So here we see the judgment coming. Antichrist allies turn on the great harlot. And the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, so this is verse 16, the 10 horns which you saw on the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So they turn on her. You remember that when the Antichrist sets himself up in the temple to be worshipped, he can't share worship with anybody else. So he's going to turn on this false religion that's helped him thus far, and he's going to take control. So these that hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, and eat her flesh and burn her with fire. This violence probably takes place at the midpoint of the tribulation, where he sets himself up to be worshipped. Here, the apostate religion discovers the true nature of the beast. And ultimately, the Antichrist will not tolerate any worship except of himself. The son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits in the temple of God, showing himself to be God. So they burn her with fire. So once his power has been consolidated, the Antichrist no longer needs the help of this religious Babylon. And he will then work to dismantle and destroy her with her one world religion. And this has always been the goal of tyrants and most politicians, to use religion for their purposes and discard it. So they make them, useful idiots. Verse 17, God's hand ultimately directs all of this. So verse 17 says, "For God has put it in their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled." So here we have God puts it in their hearts. So God is directing judgment against this religious Babylon. And God will sometimes use a wicked group. Here, the 10 kings will be an instrument of his judgment against another wicked group, which is the religious Babylon. To be of one mind and to give their kingdom to the beast. So God will ordain the political support of these 10 kings for the Antichrist. And God will give the world just what it wants: a godless religion and godless rulers. So moving on, verse 18, which shows the great harlot is identified with Rome. So the woman you saw, verse 18, the woman you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So that great city, in John's day, there was no doubt which city reigns over the kings of the earth, and that was Rome. Rome ruled throughout the land. Remember, they helped put Christ on a cross, so it was their system that and their way of execution that was used to put Christ on a cross. So Rome is the political, economic, and religious center of the world at that time. But Babylon, in the sense of the world system, has always been that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So the question for our Christian community, or for Christians, is: does it reign over me? Am I a citizen of a better city, which is Jerusalem, or the kingdom to come? So that's a question to ask ourselves, because the beast system is already in play. So which part are you? You part of the world system, which is part of the beast system, or are you in Christ's community? So the great city, or that great city, again, the association of this harlot of religious Babylon is with Rome, and doesn't mean that the Roman Catholic Church is identical to this religious Babylon, though the apostate Roman Catholics will definitely be a part of this great harlot. And so in closing, the great city, or Rome, was the ready personification of Babylon, the world in rebellion against God in John's day. And so today, idolatry is just as strong, but more dispersed. And today, which city in the world is most readily identified with this world system? And we talked about that earlier. Could it be Hollywood, or Wall Street, or is it Washington? So we see that a lot, and we want to recognize the United States as being part of this, but there's no mention of the United States. So, but we still have that system in play. There's that satanic system that's in play in the United States already. So, and so we'll see that blossom and grow. So next week, as we get into chapter